A dead man's phone. That is what broke this open. On April 25, 2026, 12,000 fighters entered 5 cities before dawn. Mali's defense minister, Sadio Kamara, was eliminated at his home in Kati alongside his family. The bomber knew the address, the schedule, the gate. When soldiers searched his phone, they found names, military names. 5 soldiers now face Mali's military court with, and I am quoting directly, solid evidence of collusion. That is the first betrayal. There are 4. The second is a 72-hour warning that reached the right desks and was ignored. The third is $115 billion in African gold. 1 decade. Dubai refineries. No export records. That money paid for this war. The fourth is a military alliance already cracking under pressure, and the siege of Mali Kidal is what will split it open. If you have ever been told that African conflict has no external design, what you are about to hear is the answer they never wanted you to find. April 25th was not chaos, it was choreography. 5 cities, simultaneously. On the same night, across an entire nation, 12,000 fighters moved with a precision that no spontaneous operation produces. And in Ouagadougou, a man named Alessandro walked directly to the private residence of a government minister, not a barracks, not a checkpoint, a private residence. Al Jazeera flagged it. The Atlantic Council flagged it independently. Both organizations noted the same unsettling conclusion. This level of coordination does not emerge from a desert camp. It requires access. It requires someone on the inside feeding information outward. Think about what that means for a moment. Alessandro did not stumble onto that address. He was not guessing. He knew the location, the gate, the patrol schedule, the precise moment of exposure. According to reports reviewed by Al Jazeera, the operational details of that strike matched information that could only have come from within the security structure itself, not near it. Within it, he detonated. He was eliminated. And then the soldiers moved in. Because the precision of that night was not an accident. It was a product, and products have suppliers. When soldiers searched Alessandro's phone after his removal, they did not find a blank device. They found names, military names. Records indicate that pre-strike communications existed between Alessandro and active military personnel exchanges that, according to local reports reviewed by Al Jazeera, took place in the days leading up to April 25th. This was not a coincidence of timing. The data on that phone told a story that investigators had not yet been prepared to hear. Bamako moved fast. On May 2, 2026, the military court in Bamako placed 5 soldiers under formal investigation. The court's own language was unambiguous. Documents from the proceeding confirmed the phrase, solid evidence of collusion with armed factions. These were not suspicions. These were not preliminary inquiries based on rumor. These were arrests grounded in documented communication records linking serving military personnel to the armed groups that coordinated the April 25th operation. 5 soldiers, first confirmed. Confirmed is the operative word. But the investigation did not stop at 5 names. Sources speaking to RFI in early May indicated that the probe was already expanding, moving beyond the military structure and toward political figures. What began as a question of operational betrayal had grown into something harder to contain. Because the relevant question was no longer simply who helped. The relevant question had become who decided not to stop it, who received intelligence and held it, who had the power to close a door before April 25th and chose to leave it open. That is a different kind of complicity. It does not require a phone call to an armed faction. It only requires silence at the right moment, in the right position, at the right price. And that kind of silence, the kind purchased in advance, the kind that looks like negligence until you trace the money, that is the signature of what analysts have come to call the conflict gold architecture. Not one country, not one faction, a system, a network of interests that profits when governments fall, and borders blur and extraction continues uninterrupted through the smoke. The phone revealed the names. The names pointed to the structure. The structure pointed somewhere else entirely. But the phone was only the beginning. What the investigation uncovered pointed to something much older and much more expensive. 5 soldiers. That was the first announcement. But sources speaking to RFI confirmed that the probe is already expanding toward political figures. Not military. Political. The question stopped being about who carried the operation. It became about who had the power to prevent it and chose not to. That silence has a price. Someone paid for it in advance. The conflict gold architecture does not hire soldiers, it hires silence. And the trail that leads back from Alessandro's phone does not end at a uniform. It ends at a ledger. The gold leaves Mali before anyone can name it, before it has a record, before it has a country of origin. It leaves in pockets, in bags, in the hands of men who move fast and ask no questions, because the questions were answered upstream at the site, at the point of extraction. Northern Mali, the Gorma region, artisanal miners, small communities built around narrow seams of rock, around tools passed down between generations, around an economy so informal it barely registers in any government ledger. These are not industrial operations. These are families. These are men knee-deep in dirt before sunrise. And then, according to the Century's conflict gold research, armed factions arrive. They do not mine. They never mined. They tax. Every gram extracted, every small pouch weighed on a handheld scale, triggers a payment to men with weapons. The gold moves. The weapons stay. That is the first link in the chain. From the site, the gold moves to a local middleman. From the middleman to a regional consolidation point. From there to a courier. And according to research from AES Africa, couriers carry up to 40 kilograms per week through Bamako Airport, facilitated by corrupt officials embedded inside the system itself. 40 kilograms per week through a major international transit hub. Walking through because the right people were already paid. From Bamako, the gold reaches a refinery. The refinery processes it, stamps it, certifies it, and a gold bar with no origin, no village, no miner, no armed faction, no border crossing in the dark, enters the global commodities market as a legal certified asset. Central bank purchase. Exchange listed instrument. Retirement fund holding. No origin, no record, clean. According to the Cradle's 2025 investigation titled Empire of Gold, the UAE's expanding grip on Africa's mineral wealth from 2012 to 2022, 2,569 tons of African gold entered the United Arab Emirates without matching export declarations from the source countries. That represents approximately $115 billion moving through a system specifically designed to lose its origin somewhere between the mine and the refinery. 2,569 tons. With no export records, for 1 decade. That is not smuggling, that is infrastructure. And then there is the human detail, the one that lands differently. Reuters interviewed gold miners in Mali in April 2026, days after the April 25th operation. Days after 12,000 fighters moved across 5 cities, the miners were still working, extracting. One said it plainly on the record. Gold is too valuable to walk away from even with the war going on. These are the miners. This is what they said. Not strategists, not officials, reading from prepared statements. The people at the bottom of the chain, whose labor feeds every link above them, looked at the offensive and kept working. Because stopping was never an option the conflict gold architecture offered them. And here is the structural point. This pipeline did not begin on April 25th. It was operating before the offensive. It will continue after Kidal is resolved, after the press cycle moves on. The conflict gold architecture is not a consequence of the war. Records indicate the inverse. The war is a consequence of the architecture. The instability is not the problem the system is trying to solve. The instability is the condition the system requires to function. That reframes the April 25th operation entirely. It reframes the 12,000 fighters. It reframes the silence, purchased in advance, the silence that connects back to Alessandro's phone, to the 5 soldiers, to the solid evidence of collusion recovered from a single device. When you trace the money, the war stops looking like a war. And that is when the gold trail stopped looking like a local economy and started looking like a designed system. 2,569 tons, no export declarations, 1 decade. According to the Cradle's 2025 investigation, approximately $115 billion in African gold passed through external refineries without a single matching export record. Every refinery in that chain knew what it was receiving. They processed it anyway. They called it legal. The architecture was built specifically so that they could, which means the architecture was built by someone, for a purpose. The question is not whether this system was designed, it is who held the pen. Kidal fell in a single night, April 25th. The FLA announced full control of the city before dawn. Malian forces and external security units pulled back to the former MINUSMA base on the eastern edge, hemmed in by walls, by uncertainty, by a city that had just changed hands in the dark. The fighters who coordinated 5 cities in a single operation had taken Kidal. But a city taken is not a city held. The AES understood this immediately. Within 72 hours, the counter-offensive began taking shape. Not a single-point response. A geometry. Airstrikes arrived from the east and from the West Niger and Burkina Faso, contributing air assets to the operation. Ground forces pushed north from the south. And according to monitoring organizations tracking the Sahel corridor, the Algerian border was effectively sealed, cutting the northern route. 15,000 troops activated across the alliance. 3 countries. 1 coordinated answer. According to Al Jazeera's May 5, 2026 report, 1 week after the operation, armed factions retain territorial gains inside Kidal, but face mounting military pressure on every side. The pocket is closing. Now consider what it took to close it. Burkina Faso deployed air assets to this counter-offensive. That sentence carries more weight than it appears to. This is not a pledge made at a summit, not a solidarity statement released to the press. Records confirm Burkina Faso participation in coordinated AES airstrikes, operational, real, in live combat conditions. For the first time since the alliance was formalized, Ibrahim Traoré committed resources to a joint military operation beyond his own borders. He did not wait for external permission. He read what was at stake. He read the 12,000 fighters, the 5 cities, the silence purchased in advance, the same silence that connects back to Alessandro's phone, to the 5 soldiers, to the solid evidence of collusion recovered from a single device. He read the conflict gold architecture's signature in the operation, and he answered with air assets. That is not a symbolic gesture. That is a commander making a decision. And now consider what happened to the fighters who made it to Kidal. 1 week ago, reports from Bamako described coordinated incursions across the capital. Fighters reached the defense minister's residence. 5 cities. 1 night. The scale of that operation suggested confidence not just in numbers, but in the belief that what they took, they could keep. Reports from humanitarian monitoring organizations now describe Kidal as essentially surrounded. And those same reports describe something else. Something that changes the frame entirely. Some fighters inside the city have requested humanitarian corridors to exit. The city they entered with force, the city they announced as a victory. They are now asking for a way out of it. Hold that image for a moment, not with mockery, with weight. Because this is exactly what the conflict gold architecture counted on not happening. The plan accounted for the fall of Kidal. It did not account for 15,000 troops activating in 72 hours. It did not account for Burkina Faso's air assets arriving from the west. It did not account for an alliance that had spent 2 years building exactly this kind of response capacity quietly, without press conferences, without external validation. The architecture designed a trap. It was a precise trap, built on assumptions about how the alliance would respond. And the trap closed on the wrong side. The fact that you are still watching, that you stayed through the gold trail, through the soldier's phone, means you already understand something that most observers are still refusing to see. This is not a Mali story. This is a test, and the AES just showed the world its answer. Documents suggest that this test was anticipated. Not in the days before April 25th, not even in the weeks before. The blueprints for this kind of operation, the funding structure, the timing, the geographic logic of the incursion follow a pattern that intelligence analysts inside the alliance had already mapped and war-gamed against. Traoré had already read this blueprint, and his response was nothing like what the architecture expected. France 24 confirmed on May 1, 2026. The alliance between the FLA and the armed factions they fought alongside is tactical, not ideological. The FLA wants Azawad independence. The armed factions want territorial governance under a fundamentally different legal framework. 2 groups, 1 city, 2 futures that cannot coexist under the same flag. The siege of Kidal is compressing that contradiction into a single pressure point. The alliance will not survive it. The question is, which side moves first and what the AES has already positioned to respond. The alliance between the FLE and JNIM was never built on shared belief. France 24 confirmed this on May 1, 2026. A common enemy but not a common project. Those were their words, not an analyst's interpretation, not a headline inference. The FLA wants Azawad, a secular political entity, international recognition, a seat at a table with flags and cameras and signatures. JNIM wants territory governed by a different legal architecture, courts they already run, tax structures they already enforce, a social order that answers to no external authority. According to the Soufan Center, JNIM in parts of northern Mali has already moved from hit-and-run operators to something that looks more like a shadow government. These are not compatible visions of the morning after. When you have a common enemy, you form a tactical alliance, you coordinate operations, you share targeting intelligence, you do not share a flag. The Chatham House analysis stated plainly, when you make a jihadist alliance public, you do not just gain a military partner, you inherit their reputation. The FLA entered Kidal, and with it, it inherited every ambition NIM holds for what Kidal becomes. The FLE fighters, who celebrated on April 25th, did not all understand what they had agreed to. Some of them were operating on one timeline. Their partners were operating on a different one entirely. Now consider the third layer of this story, the one that does not appear in most reporting. Sources speaking to RFI, subsequently reported by Pravda Mali on May 3, 2026, revealed that the governor of Kidal, Agamu, issued a warning to external security forces stationed in Mali 72 hours before April 25th. The warning was specific. The response was silence, not delayed coordination, not an incomplete relay. Silence. Think about what that means. External actors with full advance intelligence made no defensive adjustment, no reinforcement, no pre-positioned assets, no signal to allies on the ground. This is not an oversight. Oversights do not repeat at scale. This is a pattern, and patterns have architecture behind them. That architecture has a name. The conflict gold architecture does not need military victory. It needs the state to remain weak enough that extraction continues. A stable Kidal with a recognized government, functioning courts, accountable revenue flows is a problem for the architecture. A contested Kidal, partially controlled, permanently uncertain, is ideal, which means the architecture had reasons to want the FLE inside Kidal and the alliance distracted. Not a decisive outcome for either side. Just enough instability to keep the $115 billion moving through Dubai with no export records. Just enough chaos to make accountability impossible. Remember the soldier's phone, the 5 men, the solid evidence of coordination that should not have existed between parties that claim to be enemies. That evidence does not exist in a vacuum. It exists inside a system that has been running for 60 years and knows exactly how to stay invisible. What distinguishes Traoré is that he read the blueprint before the operation began. He has not repeated the model of importing external security without strategic conditions attached. He built a different architecture. The A's, the collective military response, the political insistence on sovereignty as a non-negotiable precondition. He deployed air assets from Burkina Faso in this operation not as a reaction, as an execution. The 15,000 troops that activated in 72 hours, that number did not emerge from emergency meetings. It emerged from preparation, from a war game the alliance had already run against exactly this kind of incursion. The conflict gold architecture has survived every previous challenge because it could always anticipate the response. Governments negotiated. Governments stalled. Governments accepted the framework because the alternative felt unthinkable. This government did not negotiate. This government executed. The architecture designed a trap. It built on 60 years of assumption about how African governments respond to pressure slowly, partially, with one eye on the foreign creditors watching from Geneva. And for the first time, the trap closed on the wrong side. The conflict gold architecture has survived every intervention for 60 years, but it has never faced this. 3 things happened in Mali in the space of 72 hours. A phone exposed the insider network. The network pointed to a gold trail. The trail led to a system running for a decade through refineries that asked no questions and logged no records. And then 15,000 troops moved. Airstrikes arrived from 2 directions. Kidal became a pressure cooker. The city taken in one night is now a city its occupants are asking to leave. The first insight the coverage missed. Arresting 5 soldiers does not dismantle what built them. The investigation expanding toward political figures is not dysfunction, it is precision. Insider networks are cultivated, they are funded, and the funding runs through the same channels that make this war financially sustainable. The same 2,569 tons, the same Dubai refineries, the same legal gold bar with no origin story. The second insight, naming the conflict gold architecture out loud, is a strike. Every time the chain is traced from a Mali mining site to a Dubai refinery, to a central bank vault, the system loses a fraction of its invisibility. Invisibility is the only thing this architecture requires to function. The third insight, the AES just proved in real combat conditions that African collective military response is not a concept. It is a deployable reality. 15,000 troops, air assets from 2 countries, a 72-hour mobilization that no external playbook had built into its assumptions. This is what they did not calculate. If this video gave you something the headlines did not, if you followed the gold and understood why this matters beyond the map, share it with someone who still believes these conflicts have no external logic. One person. That conversation is the point. Hit like, because what is documented here, the phone, the gold trail, the 72-hour warning that was ignored, deserves to stay in feeds longer than a news cycle. And if this changed how you see the Sahel, drop 4 betrayals, your country, and the one layer of this story that landed hardest in the comments below. Let's see who is actually paying attention. The blueprint Traoré used to answer this, the sovereign architecture built while everyone else was still negotiating the terms of their own dependency. That video is ready for you. The link is in the description. It starts exactly where this one ends. And it explains why the conflict gold architecture has never faced a response quite like this one before.